Well, folks, the time has finally arrived. If any of you have been following my Caliber Throwdown series between the 9mm, the 40 Smith & Wesson, and the 45 ACP, you'll know that I was waiting on really a combination of components to continue. I actually started the Caliber Throwdown series with a history on each one of the calibers. So I needed everything that you see right here before I could proceed to the next step, which is what I like to call junk science, but it's one of the most unscientific, I guess you could say, tests that I've done. Let me give you a breakdown of some of the cool stuff that I have here, and I also want to give a shout out to some of the people who actually helped make this happen. First off, I've got the Ransom Rest over here. Nothing is possible without this guy. What the Ransom Rest does is the Ransom Rest takes essentially me out of the equation. It takes the human element out of it. Many times whenever we're talking about felt recoil, accuracy, any number of things that relate to how a firearm functions, we always have to put an asterisk next to that because it depends on, I know there's a number of other things, you know, wind, ammo, and all that, but the human element and the human interaction is the number one thing that probably contributes to most inconsistencies involving any type of test that you might be running. So again, this is obviously an open environment, so we know that there are other things that come into play, but taking the human out of it is the number one driver of getting us a little bit closer to some consistencies as far as feeling like we have a fair comparison. What the Ransom Rest does is it comes with certain pre-made inserts. This blue insert that you see right here, this insert is cut on both sides of it to accept a particular firearm. It's not a one-size-fits-all. There's a whole array of these inserts on Ransom Rest's website to fit any particular gun you might want. And even like Glocks, for instance. This is a Glock, of course, a Glock 22. Excuse me, a Glock 17. It's not a one-size-fits-all for Glocks as you might be thinking. I mean, if you have a small Glock, the grip angle is a little bit different on the back of it if it's a subcompact versus a full-size Glock. You've got your different generations that might have your finger cutouts or your finger grooves in the front of the frame. So these are specific to exactly the gun that you are shooting. So that's very, very important. What the Ransom Rest does is it's the closest thing you can do. And look, guys, the military, law enforcement, everybody uses these things, the FBI, to test out firearms. It's the closest thing you can do to simulate the actual grip and the pressure of absorbing that recoil when you're firing a gun. It's the closest you can get without actually having a human. Between these inserts, these knobs that hold these inserts in place, and the fact that you have a spring-loaded device right here that's not just like a vise. This is going to, when you fire it, it will actually recoil back. So it's going to give you recoil motion going back. That's the thing that a vise can't give you. A lot of people can clamp these things in vices, and yes, you can probably get some things measured at that point, and probably talk a little about reliability and accuracy at that point, and probably be pretty good. The thing you're not duplicating is that human hand and the felt recoil of that recoil impulse going backwards. So that's what the beauty of the Ransom Rest is. We've got it locked down with 3 big C-clamps onto this table to keep it from moving. But I got to tell you, this base that comes with it, it's like a 30-pound base. With a 9mm especially, this thing doesn't move anyway. But nevertheless, I'm trying to get as accurate and as close as I can. So what I did is I put 3 C-clamps. Of course, this one here would be a bit of a reach, although I could probably get an oversized C-clamp on this 4th one. But like I said, one probably does the trick because this thing doesn't move without any of them. So we've got that locked in. They come with one lever that you can actually hold to do the trigger pull right here. That's just like a little bit of a lever right on the side of the Ransom Rest. What Mike and the guys from Ransom International sent me was, it's kind of like a 10-speed bicycle brake, and it actually goes over here and it gets you even farther away. In other words, you're not pushing, pressing, putting any pressure on the actual device itself because you're even more remote now by using this to pull your trigger from a couple of feet away. So it again, it takes the human element even farther away. So that's kind of cool. If you'll notice, you just charge the slide, trigger's ready, and then you pull this, and it fires the firearm for you. Very cool setup. This is a must if you want to do this type of training. Now, I've been waiting on the Mantis X10 to come out for quite some time. I ran into the guys at Mantis a couple of years ago, and I used their older system. I think it was the X3. Very fond of it. It was a nice tool that helped you kind of change your grip and pointed out some helpful hints if you were shooting using an accelerometer that's actually mounted to the front of your firearm. You see I have mine right here on the rail of this Glock. And I told them that I was really interested in seeing recoil impulse. I wanted to see what the pistol did after it was fired. And what they did before that was they would measure how you were holding the gun as far as aim, and then they would measure, the device would pick up your trigger pull. And I was very interested in what happened after the trigger pull, not just up to it. I wanted to see what happened after it. So along with many other upgrades that they've done, the X10 actually now includes that recoil impulse, so you can actually see what your muzzle is doing after the shot. Very, very cool. And then of course I have my LabRadar right here. The point of the LabRadar, which uses Doppler radar to measure feet per second downrange, the point of that is to make sure that I purposely am using my favorite ammo, Armscore ammunition, because I find that it's extremely consistent. It's loaded very consistently. Yes, it's mass produced, but for some reason they mass produce this a lot more consistently and accurately than a lot of the other brands out there. So, and it's very affordable. So that's one of the things that is, you're not giving up your quality. So by having the LabRadar, if I see inconsistencies in my recoil impulses and even accuracy for that matter, I'll be able to measure that with the LabRadar to see if maybe I had a different load. Maybe, if I had a hot load from Armscore or a weak load from Armscore. So all of this together is going to afford me the opportunity to do one of the most consistent types of testing that I could ever do. Now, what I've done is I've chosen 3 Glocks in these 3 calibers, the 9, the 40, and the 45. Of course, I've chosen the 17. They're all full size. I've chosen the 17 and 9. I've chosen the 22 in the 40 Smith & Wesson, and I've chosen the 21 in the 45 ACP. All full frame, full slides, all have rail on the front of them so that I can put the Mantis device on the front. You will notice, by the way, that my Mantis device is actually installed what they call backwards on the system itself, but they work backwards. You basically go into your settings and you can set if you set this thing backwards. The reason why I put mine backwards is because it charges with a USB port on the device, and if you put it in the configuration that they want it, the back of it actually is where the USB device is, and to me that's a little close to the trigger guard, and I didn't want my wires to be bent or not get a proper charge when I was trying to charge it if the device was actually on one of my pistols at the time. So I've mounted mine on technically backwards so that I can charge it from the front whenever I want to. So I just went into the settings and I put in there that I had the thing mounted backwards, so to speak, and now it accurately reads all of that. You'll notice that you can also go in there and put in the settings if you're dry firing. I've used this thing quite a bit dry firing at home to try to get used to it and get used to the charts and how they measure and study everything. There's a number of things that you can do. You can put, if it's on a rifle, shotgun, you put where you've mounted it. If it's been on the Picatinny rail, like I have it on the Picatinny rail, I know there are some mounts, I believe Mantis even makes some of the mounts that will actually affix to the bottom of the base plate of a Glock magazine. I'm sure other magazines as well. So you can actually put the device on the bottom of your grip if you wanted to. So I mean, there's a whole multitude of reasons that they have these settings in there that you need to go in there and tweak. Same goes for the LabRadar. LabRadar, you're putting your bullet grain weight and all that kind of stuff in there. So the cool thing is, guys, I'm just going to shoot this thing a little bit today to kind of familiarize myself with all of these things because I have so much going on at once. But I really wanted to share that with you guys so you could kind of see what I'm working with. And once I get familiar with all of these items working together in conjunction with one another, and I feel like I have kind of a rhythm going, if you will, then I'm going to be able to put together some good tests. And I'm going to start out, like I said, with the 9mm. I'll do a series of tests on that showing recoil impulse and all that. And I'll actually have all that data captured in the Mantis app will have all my histories in there, and I'll be able to go back to that and then line all of them up between the 9, the 40, and the 45 and compare those three. And then we can really put some of these myths to rest about things that may or may not work like others do, or you know, you've got that recoil is more than this one and all that kind of stuff. All the things that you see in the online argument. Without the Ransom Rest and the Mantis X, none of this would be possible. So again, big shout out to Mantis and Ransom Rest. Ransom International was kind enough to send me this, and so was Mantis. So thank you guys. You will be very visible throughout these videos, because again, this is not a possible test without you guys. So big time hat tip. I'm very grateful to you guys for doing this for me, because you know, guys, just so you know, I sought these guys out. They're the best at what they do. So I've probably been waiting almost a year now to put all these things together to do it, but it was worth the wait, I believe. So let's take a look. All right, guys, one thing that I want to point out is with the Mantis system, the best you can probably get, I guess mathematically on here, is a 100. That's your score of 100. The higher the score you get is based on how little movement you have. How little movement you have while you're gripping prior to shooting, how little trigger movement you have, or how little muzzle movement, I should say, you have as you're actually pressing that trigger. So your scores are based on pre-travel and grip. So it's very unlikely you'll ever see a 100 with a human holding it. However, I got some 100s, about 4 of them in a row, which I guess is, that's probably from the gun settling in. And of course, me pulling this, there is still some human interaction involved there with that mechanical pull of that trigger. So it may not be perfectly consistently rearward, and it might be pushing that trigger off a little bit, so that might knock those scores down, but consistently 98, 99, and 100. What I wanted to do is show, no matter how hard you did try, how hard that is to do with an actual human holding it. I want to show you that the Ransom Rest is doing such a fabulous job of actually holding this thing in place and being very consistent on how it goes back to every single shot in the exact same way, and takes that whole pre-travel movement and all that away from being a negative. I'm gonna actually, I've still got the same pistol that I used in the Ransom Rest with the Mantis device in the exact same position, but I'm gonna load it myself now, and I'm actually even gonna prop this on one of my Drago bags that I have over here to get as consistent as I can without pushing the gun out front. I'm gonna rest it on the bag, and I'm gonna see how close I can get to 100 and see if it's even possible. Not saying that I'm the one that can do it, but I don't know that it's possible to actually get a 100 with a human being holding it. So let's give this a shot. All right, guys, here we go. 93.5, 97.1, 92.3, 95.3, 90. Wow. Yeah, I've done better than that. Free-handed it. Let me see. Guys, if you'll notice, the blue is the grip prior to pulling the trigger. The yellow is the pre-travel or the travel of the trigger. And the red is the recoil, or at least what happens after the trigger is pulled. That's why you notice the red is a little bit more, it's a bigger, much bigger area that it's moving, and it's pretty strong and deliberate, you can see. So that's the differences of what we're looking at here, and that's what the Mantis system is actually measuring. Now here we've got our hold movement, which is the blue, excuse me, and then our trigger press, which is the yellow. So other than the fourth shot, I did okay. First and second and third shot, I did really good. And this is kind of showing you where you're pushing or pulling to, the different shots, what direction from. If your bullseye target was right here in the middle, these are the areas where your muzzle is actually moving to. And this gives you your overall scores. All right, guys, as far as I'm concerned, that was very unimpressive. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna see if I freehand hold this thing without mounting it or resting on a bag, if I can get any more consistency and a little bit higher scores, because a 90, I figured I could do better than that. Maybe not though, we'll see. This is the first time I'm using this thing. Let me get my Mantis system started again, get my rounds in here, and here we go. Let's see if I'm any more consistent like this. Probably not. Definitely not. All right, it only recorded 3 of my shots. The only thing I could figure there is maybe the system itself, the Bluetooth. There could have been an interruption between the Mantis device and the Bluetooth signal that comes to my app. But let me show you. These, let's see if you can even see that. See, the first shot was a 94.8%. Not bad right there. You see I've got some travel on the blue and very little on the yellow, which means that my trigger take up was pretty consistent. So I was actually able to outshoot freehanding the thing with 2 hands than I was on the bag, but it went south from there. 82.9 on my second shot and a miserable 69 on the third shot. So you can see all my shots seem to pull down. And of course, down and to the left, that's indicative of a right-handed shooter jerking the trigger or anticipating recoil. And let's see here. You can see right here that that's my first shot. And you can see the blue is my grip prior to taking up the slack in the trigger. The yellow, very little yellow. You want as little yellow as you can have. Oh, I know why this might be really, really bad. Okay, yeah, this is part of the, this is something that you probably need to learn, or I need to learn with the Mantis system. This thing is utilizing your target that you're shooting at. So my first score was probably better because this system doesn't know where your bullseye is. So it bases it off of the point that you're aiming at. I don't have a target set up over here. I'm basically just shooting out into the berm over here. I don't have a target set up because I don't need one today. With that in mind, that means that my second shot, I'm basically picking some random shot out here in this field or in the berm that is obviously it's in the same vicinity as my first shot, but it's not at the exact same point. So it's seeing me as not aiming accurately because I'm aiming at a different spot than number 1. And of course, the third shot is even more off from wherever I was aiming for the first shot. So if you're trying to get this some really accurate data like this, don't do like me. Set up a target. Now, obviously, as we move on with the, our test with the 9, the 40, and the 45, I'm going to have some targets set up out here because we'll also be measuring, to a certain degree, accuracy. So that's going to help me if I decide to do this. Now, if I'm using the Ransom Rest, well, I'm not moving that. So the Ransom Rest is resetting in the exact same place every single time. So it's going to be consistent. But just keep that in mind. If you're using one of the Mantis systems, you always want to pick your same bullseye for that string. If you're going to shoot 10 shots, shoot all 10 shots at that exact same bullseye. Otherwise, your scores are going to be way off if you do like I just did. Folks, it's time for me to tear down all of my stuff out here. I've had my fun for the day, taking my C-clamps off here of my Ransom Rest. I got to tell you, man, this was a very fun day for me, educational day. I kind of got to know a lot of what I'm dealing with over here, my systems, working together, the LabRadar, the Mantis X system, and of course the Ransom Rest by Ransom International. I can't, like I said, guys, earlier, I can't do this without Ransom International donating the Ransom Rest for me, Mantis sending me the Mantis X10. Thank you guys, and even LabRadar, the guys at LabRadar. You know what? You didn't give me the LabRadar, but I'm very grateful for the discount that you gave me for it because, again, I need all these pieces in place, and I get it, guys. You have to make money. My goal here is to help show that these devices all work really, really well. They work really well together. I can't say that emphatically right now because I've only run today's test, but today, no problems. And I tell you what, each one of these items will rat you out as the shooter because they will show you what you're doing wrong. And that's what I wanted. You know, we have so many arguments out there. You have so many guys out there that let's say for instance, we're talking about if we get into the Glock versus 1911 debate. You know, you've got guys, well, I've shot 10,000 rounds in this gun and I've never had a malfunction. And then you have another guy that says, oh, well, that gun is junk because I used to own one and I used to get one malfunction every 6 magazines or something like that. A lot of times it's us. A lot of times it is us. Machines fail, machines break. So I get that. But people screw up more than machines do. People screw up more than machines break. So in many cases, it's the human element that's given all the negative marks, and we naturally, from pride or whatever, we want to blame it on the weapons. So in many cases, it's really not the firearm, it's us. What this is going to allow me to do is take the doofus out of the equation, me, and focus more on the actual firearm, the actual ammunition, the performance of the caliber, all of that. Very important to me, guys, and that's what I'm setting out to do. And again, thanks to these guys, Ransom International, Mantis, and LabRadar, thanks to these guys, and of course Armscore providing the ammunition, I'm going to be able to do this. This is not a scientific study. Please understand that. I call it junk science because this is as close as I'm willing to do an actual scientific study. I am a nerd, but not to the degree that I'm going to put a white coat on and go into a laboratory and do all of this. This is where I'm comfortable. This is where I'm at peace. And I'm having fun with this, and I cannot wait to proceed more with my Caliber Throwdown series.